here to talk about Dreamforce. It's been a different sort of a Dreamforce, obviously, this year, but I still think there's been a bunch of really interesting announcements that are worth going and learning more about and talking a little bit about. Speakers today, myself, I'm Kevin, I'm the CEO here at Gearset. I'm a software engineer by background, so built a lot of Gearset's original platform and technology. I built a lot of Gearset's original platform and technology before moving across to start our sales team, which is where I spend almost all of my time these days, is chatting to customers about adopting DevOps, getting them going with, wherever they are in their maturity journey and getting them away from either change sets or adopting source control or adopting CI/CD. So that's more or less what I do with my days these days. And I hear from my colleagues, some of you may know. Do you want to give a little bit of background on yourself, Alice?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name's Ellis. You may have seen me out at previous events. So my job at Gearset, so I look after the event side of the marketing function. So I love getting out to events and getting to meet all of you and chat about DevOps. This year's obviously looked a bit different for us. So currently I'm looking after some of the virtual events, like the webinar series that we run, the customer case studies that we run, and are just generally helping muck out within marketing at Gearset.
And I think a bunch of you know who we are, so we won't labor the point since we're here to talk about Salesforce and not ourselves. But just as a bit of context, Gearset's a leading solution for Salesforce DevOps, so helping you with getting away from change sets, getting onto source control, CI/CD, getting in place robust backups, release management, whatever it is that you need to get up a good software delivery pipeline for the platform. But as I said, we're not here to talk about us. We're here to talk about Salesforce and some of the announcements that they've had this week. Dreamforce, obviously, such a massive conference. It's hard to distill down. And I guess what was nice about things like Moscone West was you could find your tribe and stay there and understand just the bits of Salesforce that you wanted to speak about most. But we've called out a few of the things that I think are going to either really, really impact the platform as a whole, so some of the really big acquisitions and things, or just more really directly teams developing on top of Salesforce. So the ones that we called out were Hyperforce, Slack and the acquisition there and just what impact that might have. Einstein Automate starting to expand out the extent of the ecosystem, and also lots of stuff on DevOps, the case for DevOps, and particularly DevOps Center. So, Alice, would you like to kick us off talking about Hyperforce?
Absolutely. So, sort of big platform news really from the Dreamforce keynote has been Hyperforce. And this is the sort of new, reimagined, more flexible infrastructure to make the Salesforce platform essentially more scalable, secure, just more powerful than we've seen before. So what does Hyperforce actually mean then? For most of Salesforce's existence, Salesforce has been a cloud service on its own, with its own cloud resources available for its customers. And as the company and cloud computing itself has evolved over time, so Salesforce has moved some of its own workloads over to other clouds like AWS, Azure, and Google. So this move now it's wanting to allow customers to be able to do the same, and that's where Hyperforce comes in. So it's a new architecture designed to help customers deliver workloads to their public cloud of choice. So simply put, just to move data securely to any public cloud. And what this means is that unlike before, so you can now securely deploy all of your Salesforce apps and services anywhere while also benefiting from that scalability and flexibility that you get from using the public clouds. So all of the data that you have in Salesforce Customer 360, all of the data in your Salesforce products, you can store that in whichever public cloud you want, whatever region you happen to operate. So what we're seeing is a really good best of both worlds move by Salesforce. And it's looking to deliver in sort of four key ways. So firstly, you've got the performance on the B2B and B2C scale. So leveraging that flexibility that I mentioned that you get with the public clouds to provide customers an easier way to leverage that computing power as and when is needed. Secondly, you've got, world-class security and built-in trust are things that we all expect from Salesforce, and Hyperforce should be no different there. It'll have a secure architecture, give users the appropriate access to the level of, sort of customer data according to your profiles. All data will be encrypted at rest and in transit, and everything you would expect to carry on ensuring the sort of world-class privacy and data security that we rely on in Salesforce. So thirdly, you can choose the location where your data will be stored to comply with the regulations specific to your company, region, industry. And this is also even for highly regulated industries as well, like the public sector. And you'll be able to manage all of that based on your sort of specific requirements. So this is a great level of flexibility that we can benefit from there. And then finally, great news for developers. So everything will be backwards compatible as well. And what that means is that all of your existing Salesforce apps, customizations and integrations, they should all be running without disruption on Hyperforce. So you won't need to be doing any fiddly reconfiguration. It should just work. Hopefully it will.
Cool. Yeah, Hyperforce is a really interesting one because I guess Salesforce kicked off the whole SaaS revolution, and obviously their data centers are world class, but so are AWS's and Google's. So it'll be interesting to see maybe if it impacts some of the limits and starts to move away from maybe some of the fixed compute capacity that Salesforce has been able to give us in the past. So it'll be an interesting one.
Kevin, have you heard, so basically, if I'm under, from what it's kind of sounds like is with Hyperforce, you're going to have your ability to put this on any cloud. So you're going to be paying twice as much because you're going to pay for Salesforce licenses and then have to pay for your own infrastructure on top of it? Or have you heard if they plan on giving you, if you're using Hyperforce, your Salesforce license is half the cost or something?
I haven't heard any pricing at all. I suspect this will be a premium product for those customers that really need it. But I also would guess that it's probably going to be worth it for those customers to unlock all those like liquid compute resources and things. So I'd suspect the majority of SMBs and things will still stay on Salesforce data centers. And then for those customers that really need to break out of it, you'll be able to move to those other computes. The details have been thin on it, I guess, from that kind of point of view. My guess is that Salesforce will make sure that it's priced appropriately for the customers that are for customers' ability to pay for it.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the short answer is I don't know. I don't think they've spoken about it yet.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. So moving on, the big announcement this year has been the sort of absolutely massive acquisition of Slack. Personally, I find this the most exciting announcement in terms of how this partnership is going to work and what that's going to look like over 2021 and the near future. We use Slack, we use Salesforce, and we use the integrations already. So it's really exciting from our own business's perspective into what they're going to deliver there. I think it tied in really nicely. So a big theme that we've seen this Dreamforce has been around this new all digital world that we're operating in, and that need for all of our businesses across whatever industry to be able to deliver connected digital experiences. And I think we always think about delivering these for our customers, but especially this year, there's been a big push to think about how we can deliver these experiences to our own employees as well. So I think this move to acquire Slack could be a really transformative moment for the way that we work with Salesforce and the way that we work digitally. From the keynote, Salesforce believes that it's how companies are going to continue to see that growth and drive success in this new world is through a combination of Customer 360 in Salesforce and Slack. So it looks like Slack is going to be the new interface for Salesforce Customer 360, with the hope of transforming how we talk to each other and collaborate and use that information, customer information across Salesforce, as well as all the information that's coming in from our other business apps and systems into Slack. So a great step towards building those connected customer and also employee experiences. So, I probably speak for lots of us here, but I'm really excited to see what, it's a big mission statement, to see what that looks like in practice, and what's delivered, especially as we use this every single day as part of our job. So definitely an exciting one to keep an eye on.
Do folks on the call all use Slack? Is there anyone here that isn't also a Slack customer as well as a Salesforce customer?
Customer or user? I mean, some of the, they got the free version.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I'd say customer. Businesses that are customers of.
It looks like Bill Hamilton does not use Slack, if I interpreted the hand raise correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. Our company doesn't use it really at all. We're more of a Teams.
Teams.
I personally only use it to listen to the Good Day Sir podcast.
It's really interesting just with Teams, and you've got a really nice war now, I guess, between Microsoft and Salesforce, and Microsoft bringing Dynamics Office and Teams, and then Salesforce having Salesforce, obviously, Quip and Slack now together. Just such an interesting suite you can build your company on top of. That's what we use internally. So we have no Microsoft stuff at all. We're just Salesforce and G Suite and Slack. So I'm really, really interested to see how they integrate these things together.
I'll put in 2 cents. We were very much a Slack user way before we were a Salesforce user.
Oh, really?
In particular, our development team. And I'm not a dissenting vote, but I'm concerned that we may not be able to continue to use Slack the way we want it without using it bundled with Salesforce. So I'm interested to see where it goes as well, but very much excited about Slack as a product, and I'm apprehensive about where it heads actually.
Really?
I think the integration with Salesforce will be fantastic for our Salesforce usage, but how we use Slack independently of Salesforce. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see. I guess Slack has such a vibrant ecosystem. I can't see them doing anything to rock that boat. If you look at what they've done with Roku, they embraced the good parts of the platform and allowed all the marketplace to flourish. And I think Slack is just increasingly the heart of how a lot of those integrations flow. And I think you're seeing the same with Salesforce, where Salesforce is extending way beyond what Salesforce traditionally was. So I completely hear some of those fears, but I've got a faith in their leadership and what they're doing. I don't think they're going to mess it up. Just because it's such a valuable ecosystem, it must be part of the acquisition price tag. Must be.
Cool. So the other sort of main announcement on this side of things, I think Einstein Automate. So building out that Einstein functionality is the latest suite of these tools, and this time it's a new offering of end-to-end automation tools. And this is to help anyone in the company, regardless of technical ability, to be able to build out more intelligent workflows and integrate data across any system with clicks, not code. Hopefully just to free up more time to deliver value, which is what we all want. And we've seen this push for more automation from Salesforce, particularly over the last few years. As they've started to realize and advocate for the importance of DevOps, automating manual time-consuming processes. So Einstein Automate is another step in the right direction for smoothing out some of those more fiddly processes in Salesforce, like building flows. So one of the key things to sort of take note on, there was a few more than we're going to discuss, but I think the two main ones, the first one being Flow Orchestrator here. So This is basically a low-code workflow development tool, helping us to compose new workflows that automate complex multi-user processes and approvals, so that Salesforce will handle more of the manual repetitive steps for you. Again, with the aim of the game being to speed up these processes and use some of this AI generated intelligence as well. This is the way it's going to work. So AI generated next steps and recommendations will be built into the workflow. And what these will do is these will prompt users throughout processes to identify things like bottlenecks that are causing delays, and help you fix and avoid those. And it looks like it's going to be a bit of a combo of AI-infused bots, flows, and components. They've suggested the date of summer 21 for open beta. So one to mark your calendars for, because it'll be really interesting to see how this will work in practice. So we won't know exactly how it will work till we can try it, but I think it would definitely be worth trying it out. And the second sort of key product in Einstein Automate is this MuleSoft composer for Salesforce. So it's always a challenge to unlock and connect data across apps and systems from different places. How can we really sort of build that complete picture of what our customers look like if we're not getting all the information, or it's scattered across different places? It can be really difficult to build up that ideal profile. And this is the challenge that MuleSoft Composer for Salesforce is looking to fix, I think. So it's going to give everyone in the organization an even playing field in terms of the ability to connect and integrate different apps and data from across different multiple systems to Salesforce, all without writing any code. So really leveling the playing field there. And it's going to come equipped with a library of pre-built connectors and templates to easily automate these integrations, likely for the most popular integrations, I would imagine. So hopefully this is going to allow our Salesforce admins and business users just to move that much faster and unlock even more of a 360 view of the customer. So without even having to write any code. So we're hoping that it will give you an easier way to sort of start bringing all of that customer information into one place. And this feature is expected to be generally available early 2021 as well. Both these Einstein Automate products will be. So I'm keen to see how these work for real use cases when they come out.
Cool. Yeah, the MuleSoft stuff's a little bit of a blind spot to me because I've not used it in anger, but I guess we sort of increasingly see just Salesforce is just one piece of the puzzle. So finding easier ways to get things in and out can only be a good thing. This is obviously the area that I was most interested in. I guess for the last number of years, we've seen DevOps just increasingly a key theme at Dreamforce. And I was happy to see the continuation of that as a common theme, which is this need to get Salesforce DevOps amongst release teams and development teams to speed up delivery times and ultimately the success that those teams are seeing. This was sort of throughout the conference and throughout the session. So I've got a couple of takeaways that I've seen this year. I think at every Dreamforce, we see a lot of focus surrounding making the most from your Salesforce investment. I mean, as Mark sort of alluded to earlier, Salesforce isn't the cheapest platform in the world. So there's that side of the ROI equation, but there's also the opportunity from really nailing everything and getting that customer 360 view. It can be so impactful to your business. And I watched the session where Salesforce presented this slide. What I liked about it was that it resonated with some of the stuff that I've seen from, speaking to the thousands of dev teams that I've spoken to that are using Gearset. And get these 5 things right, Salesforce says, and you've got a solid platform for planning future development. And I think the key is agility. Companies want to be agile, able to respond to the events that come or adapt their plans. And if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that anything can happen. And having agility helps when sands start shifting beneath you. But it isn't easy, and especially for large enterprises. So how do companies become agile? Salesforce, like ourselves, advocate DevOps as a key part of that solution. Mature DevOps processes help Salesforce teams to deliver constant stream of value to their businesses in the form of incremental improvements. And if anything isn't quite right, it can be rolled back or it can be tweaked. And, you learn from every increment informs the next. Automation in particular, sort of see it through, again, lots of the themes at Dreamforce. It's the real driver of ROI in DevOps as well. Salesforce says that the ROI on automation will consistently outperform other returns. And really what they're talking about here is CI/CD. So you've got to have a highly automated release pipeline. Also testing, this is an area where we see teams are still falling short, to be honest. It's often added in after the fact, and potentially because it is a little bit less important to get going with, to build that solid foundation with. But once you have that solid foundation in place, starting to focus on testing's key. Automated unit testing is an absolute must for reducing the number of bugs in production, but so is static code analysis that you can trust, that informs you instead of just nagging you. And yeah, it'd be nice to see static code analysis get wider adoption and become just that key part of a team's tool set. We'd also add automated backups into the mix. I guess we see more and more integrations into Salesforce, feeding data in, and I guess any one of those can go wrong. And you want a solid backup strategy in place to protect that investment, not just your data, but also your code configuration, anything where those Einstein automation jobs might run amok. Although Salesforce was initially potentially a little bit slow to the DevOps party, it's fantastic to see the core principles of DevOps, speed, collaboration, reliability, being worked into the platform just across the board. We're seeing more scope for collaboration through the Slack announcement and other steps toward automation with Einstein Automate. And of course, the work of DevOps Center is going to be key to tying a lot of this stuff together and getting success with it. I think we all know that Salesforce is a complex platform. It can take time for teams to become proficient in DevOps, even if they're used to agile development on other platforms. And there are a range of tools from Salesforce and its partners available to help with DevOps. Ourselves, for example, offer a comprehensive suite of tools, although there are others. I like this diagram from one of the sessions because I think it covers all of the DevOps essentials and recaps some of the elements previously mentioned on the last slide. I think version control, having that single source of truth, it's not your production org, using Git to manage development and collaborate as a team. It's the foundation. It really is the foundation on which you'll build a good release management process. So it's really important to start there and get that right. Not just using it as backup, but having all changes flow via the source control system. So no excuses. That's where the changes flow via. That's where folks collaborate. And once you have everything in source control for the entire team, everybody taking part in it, then you can start to look at CI/CD, having the tools and processes in place for that highly automated release pipeline. And like we mentioned, automating more of your processes is really key for getting that agility. What I would say, though, with a slight caveat to that, is just don't try to automate everything at once. Start small and layer in more and more automation as you go. Testing, make sure the code's tested thoroughly. Any changes, you want to make sure that you have enough confidence in them beyond the human factor, that the software is going to inform you that the software is right. So unit testing, static code analysis, if you're using UI testing like Cypress or Selenium or Provar or something, it's really important to have that reliability facet of DevOps, and shipping viewer bugs, having that bug trajectory heading the right way in the graph should be the goal for every release team. It's how you're going to increase the speed of the value delivery, obviously. And finally, team collaboration. I suppose team collaboration is what it's all about. I mean, you can get the best tools in the world, but if the team aren't working well together, then it's all for naught. So team collaboration and building out your success together really is that crucial step. It sounds obvious, but it's where teams, often get the most success, more than tooling, more than anything else. The teams that take on this DevOps journey together reap the most benefits. And that is team in the widest sense. So all your developers, admins, business analysts, whoever it is that's making changes. So we always advise teams to start by assessing where your current process is, identify which areas you'd like to improve or change first, and together as a team, creating some actionable next steps to get to that next stage in your DevOps process. This way, your whole team's bought into it, aware of where you're trying to achieve, where you're going, what you're trying to achieve, and that no one is left behind. You can all scale up on the new processes and tools as you go together. I love this slide. This is one of ours. And we call this our maturity matrix. And it helps us work with our customers to identify where they are in their DevOps journey, because for different teams, for different stages of their life cycle, what's next for them is different. So it's always nice to identify where they are and what's the next most impactful thing they can do. It's definitely important to note that it is a journey, not a race. We've seen teams fail when they try to layer on too much complexity right away. So we'd always say start small and take a stepping stone approach, identify the smallest next step that they can do together as a team. And that's how you'll really start to reap the benefits from having a more agile and reliable release process. It's sort of applying the DevOps mentality to adopting DevOps, bit by bit, increment by increment. And over time, you get to learn from that feedback cycle of actually implementing this stuff as well. DevOps Center. So DevOps Center is the latest offering from Salesforce. It's been a topic of discussion again this year, and they've demoed a few new updates to the product as well. I've captured a few screenshots just for those of you that didn't catch the session. You may have heard me speak about DevOps Center before, but just as a recap on why Salesforce has actually built the thing out, and what it is, and how it looks publicly as of this week. I think we've seen Salesforce try to push the message of version control as your source of truth, shifting away from in-org development, change sets. I mean, it's why DX was born. The issue with DX, though, is that, it did enable working with source control, but it remains a really technical product with a steep learning curve. So it unlocks source control for technical users, but it hasn't helped everybody on the wider team. As I spoke about, a second ago, the whole team taking part in this stuff is key. And that's where DevOps Center comes in. It's the next phase in the vision of having Git be the way to collaborate on the platform, where declarative devs and admins can also take part in source control. It's a built-in way of adopting source control on day one, so that when the complexity increases and you need to work with other industry standard tools, you've already got that big history. You're not trying to retrofit source control onto your process. So you've got that history and investment already in your source control system. It aligns with the expectations of engineering teams, decision makers, anyone really adopting Salesforce as a platform, as more than the CRM. So what is DevOps Center in practice? Well, I've already said the idea is that DevOps Center bridges the gap between programmatic and declarative devs. The vision is a new UI-driven companion to Salesforce DX, and it'll let programmatic and declarative developers manage all their changes through Git. To begin with, it's going to cover the highlighted areas in the diagram. It's going to take changes made in your sandbox, commit them to Git, and then help you promote them up through your pipeline. But looking further out, it's going to integrate with more Git providers, work tracking like Azure's DevOps and Jira, and will almost certainly integrate some CI/CD solutions as well. Ultimately, though, the goal is to get more Salesforce teams adopting source-driven development and consequently DevOps practices, allowing them to make changes more regularly and reliably, which will ultimately get you more value from the platform. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what DevOps Center will look like in practice. I've pulled all these details from public demos, so some of them will be familiar if you've been in on all the sessions and read up on all the details already. The DevOps Center workflow is built around projects and work items. Projects are a container for your work items and have a one-to-one mapping with an associated Git repository. It's likely that DevOps Center will support all the usual Git providers, but GitHub's the first available that I've seen at launch. Within projects, then, you have a series of work items describing the various tasks, deliverables that your team will be working on. To start making changes, you open a work item, and they're pretty lightweight now, but I'd be expecting integrations with all of the popular third-party tools here. We've seen Jira, Azure DevOps, and Agile Accelerator mentioned publicly so far. When creating a work item, you'll pick a sandbox to associate it with, and this is the dev environment you'll be making changes in, and these changes will then be associated and tracked with that work item. The other thing you'll notice is that there's a destination, and that points to a Git branch. As I mentioned earlier, each project has a one-to-one mapping with a repo, and each work item has a one-to-one mapping with a Git branch within that repo. And when you start work on a work item, DevOps Center will go ahead and create the branch in the background for you. Clicking on Launch Dev Environment in the top right bounces you out to the associated sandbox, and you can start making changes. Once you've made some changes, you'll be able to associate them with your work item in a fairly neat way. DevOps Center uses the source tracking feature, which you may have seen in Scratch orgs and is now available in Sandbox as well. You can click on the Pull Changes button in the bottom left to populate your work item with all of the metadata changes that you've made in your Dev Sandbox. Looking at the metadata coverage report that Salesforce publishes, it looks like this is now pretty much at parity with the metadata API. So it's unlikely you'll accidentally miss changes that it didn't detect. We're also looking at this feature for inclusion in some of Gearset's workflows as well. It's fairly robust now compared to 2 years ago. You can then stage your changes to commit to the associated branch, and once you've done that, you can commit. You can add a commit comment, hit submit changes to commit the changes. Behind the scenes, that'll run a git checkout, git add, git commit, and git push, and make sure all those changes are committed to your branch and sync back to GitHub without you having to actually get into the nitty-gritty of the Git commands yourself by hand. If you mark this stage as completed and move the ticket to in review, DevOps Center will automatically create a pull request between the work item branch and master in the project repo. When the demo launched first, there was a very crucial missing piece. There was no built-in mechanism to push your changes back out to an org. However, as of yesterday's session, they've now previewed that functionality too. So you should expect more complete workflow in the pilot sometime next year. So once you've committed to Git, you'll now be able to promote or deploy these changes back out of your orgs and promote them up through a pipeline. You do this by navigating to the pipeline view where your available changes will appear. You can see the associated work items they're attached to as well. To promote or deploy them out, you'd simply click on the drop down and choose promote changes, and then they'll be deployed. What DevOps Center does here is not only deploy to an org, but also deploy these to your source of truth as well. Once they've been promoted to staging, here's where you'll do your testing, but it's unclear exactly what that's going to look like or what the integrations will be. After testing, use the drop down again to promote changes in DevOps Center, and they will update your repository and deploy your changes out to your production org. After this, you've successfully run your release, and you'll be able to review the release version number and details of who ran that release and when. And I think that's going to be everything that is expected from the pilot. In terms of what's coming, I've already touched on a bunch of these, but just to summarize, I'm expecting lots of integrations. I think there's going to be integrations with all of the common tools around your DevOps process, particularly popular source control providers, ALM tools, CI tools. I also have a hunch that we'll see some of the built-in CI functionality, likely based on Heroku. I think back at the announcement of Salesforce DX 4 years ago, we got a glimpse of Heroku-powered CI for Salesforce. It wouldn't be terribly surprising if that was the direction that they decided to take. So that's it for the Dreamforce 2020 highlight session. Obviously, it's a 2-week conference that covers just the massive ecosystem. But these are the things that really that piqued my interest. I hope it's been useful for you, and we've put together some of the resources on where to follow up and go get this from the horse's mouth. But a bunch of really interesting stuff was announced, and it'll be interesting to see what impact it has on the whole ecosystem over the next year. One last mention, we've seen a bunch of pent-up demand for learning materials around DevOps concepts, specifically tailored towards Salesforce teams. And to try to help some of that, we've created DevOps Launchpad. It's free learning resource that we're trying to keep vendor agnostic as possible. So there is some Gearset stuff on there, but teams have been just asking us about these concepts generally. So we've put that together, and we want to provide a whole variety of learning materials about all things DevOps for Salesforce. There's a growing number of courses on there right now, particularly focused on Git, and we're sourcing completely independent content from around the ecosystem on lots more topics as well. It's totally free, so feel free to sign up and run through some of the courses if you're interested in learning more about DevOps. And as some of you know, I'm always open to feedback, so send any feedback my way.